Hey guys, Chris Peach here, and welcome to the Money Peach podcast. Hey, do you remember growing up learning how to handle money? Yeah, neither do I. So that's why we're here today, to make your money fun again. You know, we're going to talk about the principles in life that actually matter when it comes to managing your money in a way that works. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode of the Money Peach podcast. Before we jump into another amazing episode of the Money Peach podcast, I want to take a second to talk to you guys about my free live training event, Stop Living Paycheck to Paycheck and Just Live. Join me each week on this live webinar where I show you the 4-step system we use to go from living paycheck to paycheck to later paying off $52,000 in debt in only 7 months. And as a bonus for joining me on this live training, I'll be answering any questions you may have during the live Q&A session at the end. So head on over to moneypeach.com/webinar to get registered. Welcome back, everyone, to another amazing episode of the Money Peach podcast. This is episode 40. Now, on the show today, my guest is Hilary Hendershott. Hilary is the host of Profit Boss Radio, and she's also a certified financial planner. She's very, very smart about money. I found her podcast, started listening. A little behind the scenes is I thought, how am I going to get Hilary to come on the Money Peach podcast? So with a little bit of arm twisting, a little bit of back and forth, I got her to agree to come on the show, and she crushes it. And she has a totally unique view of looking at money. She looks at the psychology, the neuroscience of our behaviors and our habits with money. And the best part was, one thing that surprised me is her and I don't completely agree on one key point of money. And we're actually going to talk about that inside the episode. So without further ado, let me bring on Hilary Hendershott. Alrighty, Hilary, thank you so much for coming on the show today. Glad you are here. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Super excited to be here. Thank you for having me on the Money Peach.
So tell us a little bit about who you are. That's where I want to start. So tell us what you do for a living, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, so I'm a certified financial planner. I'm an independent fee-only fiduciary advisor. That means that my clients never pay commissions. I don't work for a bank or brokerage or custodian where I have to sell proprietary products. And I say, just to make it simple, my business is free of conflicts of interest. Like I sit on the same side of the table with my clients and I sleep really well at night. So I love what I do. And I've been in the business for a long time, about 17 years. And about a decade ago, I really had to get honest with myself that even though I was able to advise people on how to manage their investment portfolios during the day, I was really ruining myself financially in my life. And so things really came to a head. I lost a house, spent my retirement accounts and maxed out some credit cards trying to salvage my financial life, but all the while sort of pretending that things were okay from the outside and sort of forcing my parents into a position where they had to kind of rescue me in little ways time and time again. So I just really decided that my life was not going to go that way. I decided it didn't matter to me how vulnerable I had to get or what I had to take apart or do to figure it out, but that I was going to get things going in the right direction. And I did that by becoming essentially an expert in behavioral finance, neuropsychology, and discovering the programming that was awry in me. And so now I've integrated all that learning into my practice, and I speak with women, especially on my podcast, Profit Boss Radio, and lots of men listen too. But I'm specifically moved by the ability to empower women to take control of our money and build wealth. And so I really talk with people about money programming, money scripting. A lot of people call it money blocks that get in our way. And those are everything from a belief that, having money isn't feminine, or money is power and power isn't feminine, or I don't deserve money, or I'm not good at math, or I can never earn a lot. I'm just a whatever, like insert, sort of life title there. I'm a poet. I'm an artist. I'm someone from not a fancy city. And I really invite people to transcend all those strongly held beliefs and have the financial life that they want. So it's a fulfilling life, and I love what I do.
So I'm going to back up a little bit on what you said at the very beginning. You talked about basically going in a position where you're almost completely broke or were completely broke. Yeah. Why do you think that happened?
I had a core money belief, and everyone has a core money belief. I call it the money operating system. I actually trademarked that term. It's a technology that I use in all my coaching. For me, that core money belief was there's never enough money. I was running around in the world making a decent income. I was a recruiter in Silicon Valley during the height of the dot-com craze. And so I was making six figures in my early 20s. And counterintuitively, when you believe there's never enough money, when money comes into your ecosystem, the only thing to do is get rid of it. You have to get it out of your life. Otherwise, there's too much cognitive dissonance. Your brain can't function when it believes that there's never enough money and there's actually money in your accounts. So I spent and spent and spent and spent. I racked up credit card debt and et cetera, et cetera. And I had no freedom from that behavior pattern until I recognized it as a behavior pattern that was just manifesting a belief. See, a lot of us believe that our words describe the world. So the world, like reality, comes first, and then our words or descriptions of our world come second. But in particular areas of life, especially things that are conceptual, our relationships with ourselves, our relationships with other people, relationship to time and money, these things are very conceptual. Okay, there's very little reality to these things. And so in those cases, what the neuroscientists know is that your language and words don't actually describe your world. In that case, your language and words create your world. So by believing there's never enough money, I was actually creating a world where there was never enough money.
Do you think people overspend, or have irresponsibility with money as a way to shield something else going on in their lives? The reason why I ask this is my wife and I, we went completely broke in 2011. We were making well over six figures a year and completely went rock bottom broke. And I look back at what happened to us, and I realized there was a lot of issues with our spending that was masking something else going on in our lives. Did you find that happening with you?
Yeah. So may I ask, what happened? Did you both lose jobs, or what happened to the income?
Our income, nothing happened to our income. Our spending got so out of control. It just became to the point where one day my wife was at the grocery store with our 10-month-old and could not get groceries. And that was kind of our rock bottom moment.
Oh my gosh, the same thing happened to me. I drove my leased BMW into the gas station. I couldn't get gas.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you look, there's probably a strongly held belief for you. By the way, I don't actually think that people who are unconscious about this stuff are irresponsible. I think society really relates to overspenders like they are irresponsible. And I think that has people hide and not sort of come forward and deal with the behavior. But to answer your question, I think probably if you look, you and your wife have a strongly held belief about having things and maybe the outward appearance of wealth that says you're important, or being rich or spending money makes you valuable or successful or powerful, something like that you both actually had that money belief. And when you got together and started spending money, it just was kind of luck of the draw that you both thought that way and nobody took actions to rein it in. Does that land for you at all? Does that sound like about what was going on?
And that is, it's very similar. So we were hyper consumers and nothing ever bad happened to us. We kind of thought we were invincible. Like, hey, nothing is going to happen to us. We'll be fine. We can always out earn. We can make more money. We're going to be fine. And so it became that, I guess, ignorance of we're just not going to pay attention to the money. We'll always earn more. And so we just kept racking up debt. And then it was February 2011 that the stuff, the bank accounts, the statements, the things that we knew were there that we chose not to look at for whatever reason. Mm-hmm. Looking back, I think we chose not to look at it because we didn't want to believe it could really end. So when it did end, it was pretty horrible.
Yep. Yeah. There's a book called The 7 Stages of Money Maturity. This book was a seminal book in my industry. It actually gave birth to a whole spinoff of the financial planning industry called life planning. And I don't mean life coaching. It's specifically around money. But in it, the author, Kinder, his name is George Kinder, says the first stage of money maturity is always innocence. And in innocence, there's no planning that's possible. And how you get out of innocence is you go through a stage called pain. And pain is different for everyone. So getting through, it doesn't have to be a rock bottom like it sounds like you and I both experience. For some people, it's realizing they don't want to pay the interest on their credit card debt, or watching their parents go through financial struggle. sort of that pain that you and your wife suffered turned into your passage to the next stage, which is called awareness. And so, you've sort of described that rite of passage perfectly. And, kudos to you, because a lot of people use pain to ping themselves back into innocence. So you could have, filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, wiped out the credit card debt, and sort of rinse and repeat, just started the whole process over again. But you didn't. So kudos to you.
And you see that so common. The more and more people I meet, I'll sit down with somebody and they'll say, I've declared bankruptcy twice. Well, what's going on here? So yeah, what you just said, it makes a lot of sense. So I want to transition a little bit. You kind of went from your rock bottom moment. You talked about BMW couldn't get gas. So what happened to you over the next few years to change your money beliefs?
So I got sort of bared my soul financially. A lot of what was going on was that I was really engaged in hiding what was happening in my life. And I got really clear. So there's a truism in that the hardest part of making a life-altering decision is actually making the decision. Once you've made the decision, the plan of action really lays itself out before you. And I just decided I was going to clean it all up and rebuild it all. Like, I didn't know what it was going to take, but I was committed to that it wasn't going to keep going the other direction. So everything from I had to negotiate the credit card debt down. I moved into my mother's guest room for a while and rented out my condo. I turned that BMW back into the credit union. I created a financial automation system that made it very clear for me how much money I could spend and still stay on track with my spending plan. I don't believe in budgets. I don't think that budgets are very good for people. I think they're really just an opportunity mostly for people to be out of integrity with themselves and end up with bags of receipts hanging out in their office, which sucks. So I use this automation system that gives each dollar a job. And in the beginning, it was sending money out to pay the credit card debt off, obviously. And then once I was at a net worth of zero, I could begin to build my assets. And really, paying off debt is the same as saving money. You're just sending that excess cash flow out to the credit card company or the student loan lender instead of to Charles Schwab or Vanguard, where you have your savings. So once the debt was paid off, I continued to build up the assets positively. Obviously, at the same time, I'm integrating this kind of dialogue into the work that I'm doing with clients and messaging and speaking with groups of women. I've had the pleasure of being on television news stations and speaking to women in most major cities in the US. And so I'm building a business. So, and kind of before I knew it, I checked it out and, I had become someone for whom it used to be every time I logged into my bank accounts, there would be less money than I expected. Like I thought, there's going to be, $1,000 in there. There'd only be like 800. Now, if I think there's going to be the numbers are a lot bigger now, but if I think there's going to be $1,000, it's probably going to be more like 1,300. And so that's a transformation. But then when I finally stepped in and sort of slowed down and looked at my net worth, I had a business. I own a business that I could sell for well over $1 million. I've refilled the retirement savings accounts. I have no credit card debt, an 760 FICO score. Like I've built a 7-figure net worth really through intention and concentrated action. So, and I share that number just because I want you and your listeners to understand why I say anything is possible, that your financial situation really is a function of what's going on in your head. And if you can change what's going on in your head, you can change what's going on in your bank accounts.
So Hilary, I agree with 99% of what you just said. There is 1%, and I want to go back and forth because I know you're okay with that. So I'm a big believer in my wife's name is Andrea. Once Andrea and I started measuring what came in and what went out each month, we were able to start managing that. Mm-hmm. And there's a quote that I like. It's what gets measured gets managed. And so to me, that means budgeting. If you're running a business or you're doing anything in life and you're not paying attention, just like if you take a road trip, right? You're budgeting your mileage towards your fuel as far as you can go. If I'm going through the month, and I, say I'm getting paid biweekly or whatever it might be, I know how much money's coming in. If I don't assign every dollar a name or a function or a job, basically that money's going to be lost. So I call that budgeting. And for those of you those people that don't call it budgeting or don't like the word budgeting, which is my wife, she cannot stand that word. We call it cash flow planning. So I just wanted to see your take on that, because I noticed right away, one of the things I picked up right away is you said you don't like budgeting.
Yeah. So, if you have an engineer's brain, that's all fine and good. 80% of people don't. I wholeheartedly agree that you need to know how much money is coming in and how much is going out. More specifically, I bet you and Andrea know what it takes to pay for your lifestyle. So your overhead, rent, insurance, memberships, things like that. Those are bills you've already agreed to pay, and you need to know that number. And then what happens next is, for most people, they spend what they feel like spending and save the rest. So I invite people to save based on goals. So to predetermine how much they're going to save instead of letting the numbers just rise, the spending numbers just rise to a comfort zone, and then spend the rest. And so I create a system of multiple accounts that automates that, rather than categorizing your spending based on, a lot of people do like clothing, transportation, housing, like that. But then the problem with that is that's what I call a count up system. So you have to log every transaction, and every month, starting on the first of the month, you're watching that spending in that category go up, and then you have to track it against some predetermined dollar amount that you and Andrea have agreed. We're not going to spend more than $500 on food every 2 weeks or something like that. Where I use a countdown system. So you get a spending account and a debit card attached to that account. You can spend it on anything you want. I don't care if it's a Gucci bag or a can of beans or Starbucks lattes or anything you want. But when that account balance gets to zero, you must stop spending. And what happens with this system is that people's lifestyles get right-sized almost immediately. And instead of predetermining how much they're going to spend in a specific category, they spend on what they want, and then they don't spend on the things that don't matter. So either system truly is functional. It's the truth. And I really just say I hate budgets because most people hate budgets. And the thing about that count up methodology is that if you don't log a transaction, you're in trouble. Your system is broken down until you go back to that date and log or categorize that transaction. But the automation system works with you. It stays with you no matter what, and you don't have to log or categorize things. So it's just a matter of preference. If you're not logging or categorizing and you're using the count up system, are you having different debit cards for each area of your life? Are you using cash in those areas? I've heard of the cash envelope system, which we've used before. We really liked it. And it was kind of the same thing. We had an envelope. We didn't write down every time we spent money, but we knew that at the end of the month, if there was $8 in that envelope, that means we were only spending $8 more in that category. Yeah. So I literally have had multiple debit cards in my wallet for 8 or 9 years now. And I credit this system with basically all of my personal financial success. I mean, obviously the credit cards don't earn my money, but they help me spend my money. And at this point, I do use points credit cards, and I pay off the credit cards with the balances in my checking accounts. But for many, many years, I was straight up checking accounts and debit cards. And so I have one debit card that's actually labeled. It has a label on it, and it's called Today's Fun. And anything I decide to spend on today in the moment, I use that debit card for. And then when the account balance in that account gets to zero, I stop spending until I get paid again. And at that point, it's usually in the next couple days or whatever. But the point is, I can be at zero in that account, and I'm not at zero anywhere else. And it used to be that I would just spend to zero. Right. So this is a breakthrough in that I've created fail safes for myself. So you almost sounds like you have like electronic envelopes with debit cards. Is that kind of how it was in the beginning? Yeah, the difference. So first of all, I don't recommend using cash because you can lose cash. It's just there's a lot of safety and security issues with the envelope system. And then the other major difference between this and the envelope system is that I don't have these micro envelopes. I don't have these micro categories. I have a macro category. I don't categorize based on what I'm buying. I categorize based on when I make the decision to buy it. So decisions I made yesterday or before today are those agreements, that overhead cost. Decisions I make today are for fun and flexibility, gifts, food, restaurants, clothes, like that. And then I have small tomorrow's dreams, things I want to plan for tomorrow. So my next car, my next vacation. And then there's obviously the big tomorrow's dream, which is financial freedom.
Very cool.
So I have 4 categories.
Very cool. I'm going to put, so for those listening, I'm going to make sure that I'm going to put links in the show notes to all the things we just talked about right there, and including those categories. So I want to transition now, Hilary, into you're married now. You have a 9-month-old at home, your mom. So let's talk a little bit about family and money. One of the biggest questions, if not the most common question I receive through the podcast and our blog is, how do I stop fighting with my spouse, or how do I get my spouse on board?
Mm-hmm. So any coach, any good coach that you work with, whether it be a personal coach or a professional coach, is going to start by asking you, what are your goals? What are we going to accomplish together? What do you see for yourself? What's your vision? Where are we headed? Right? The problem with couples who disagree about money is often that they disagree about where they are headed. And by that, I mean, probably the most common disagreement is he wants to save money, she wants to spend it, or she wants to save for college tuition, he wants to save for a lucrative retirement, right? Questions like these. And you're fortunately in that the problem is simple, but unfortunately in that it's often hard to solve, is that you're kind of dead in the water until you can get on board about what your goals are. You could look at it as even more formative. So earlier we talked about the money operating system. Let me give you an example of 2 money operating systems that could get together in people that otherwise would get along famously. So let's say you have someone whose money operating system is money is the root of all evil. And that's a fairly common one. Then you have someone whose money operating system is money makes me valuable. Money gives me power. Money makes me successful. You can see that one person is kind of living for money and the other person is railing against money. That's just going to be oil and water, if not like World War III, when it comes to when those 2 people sit down to the cash flow planning table or their money date, right? So you really have to make sure that you get on the same page. I mean, I'm imagining you and Andrea spent a good amount of time doing that back in 2011 after you had to get real honest with yourselves about what had been going on. It's like, okay, so we've been headed in a particular direction. We're not committed to the results. Now let's head in a different direction. And what direction is that? And so you had to agree. How much are we going to spend now? How much are we going to save for later? And like that. So, and another place you might, again, to refer you to this book, The 7 Stages of Money Maturity, I think could be really profound for people. If you find yourself in a different stage of money maturity than your partner, you have some options. You can, there's only 2 things that change people in the world. One is shame. The other is inspiration. I do not recommend using shame on people. And I recommend taking on inspiring them, right? Like what's possible for our lives if we really create a plan for financial success and get on it and stay on it. Like we might have to tighten the belt now, but imagine what we will have in a positive sense in the future and the problems we'll avoid. We won't be subject to having the kids have to take care of us. We won't have to, be a burden to friends and family. We won't feel regret about the past. And so you can really have your partner kind of transition to the same phase where you are. So those are just some getting started tips. The one thing I will say is, and I know this isn't popular advice, but for those of you out there with a partner with whom there are very, very destructive habits financially, very disempowered, not interested in improvement or self-improvement, I'll say this, it is okay to leave someone or not have a relationship go on if you cannot have the money aspect work. It doesn't make you selfish. It doesn't mean that you've given up. And I got to this in about 15 seconds. And I certainly don't recommend, I'm not saying give up easily. I believe anything can be worked out. But you also are not obligated to stay with someone just out of like a sense that, well, money shouldn't be that important. No, it is important. It's a resource for us. And especially the way things are headed in this country, you need as much of it as you can get to make sure that you have choices and options.
I want to take a second to talk to you guys about my free live training event, Stop Living Paycheck to Paycheck and Just Live. Join me each week on this live webinar where I show you the 4-step system we use to go from living paycheck to paycheck to later paying off $52,000 in debt in only 7 months. And as a bonus for joining me on this live training, I'll be answering any questions you may have during the live Q&A session at the end. So head on over to moneypeach.com/webinar to get registered. About, 2-3 years ago, I read an article that said the number one cause of divorce in North America was money problems and money fights.
Yeah.
And so money touches every aspect of our lives. And so if the number one cause of divorce or relationship struggles is money problems and money fights, I always tell people if that's the number one cause of divorce, then can you imagine if money wasn't the issue, if money wasn't the problem, if you agreed on money, how that would transition to just the opposite, but expounded. So kind of give you an example. Once my wife and I got on the same page with money, it was incredible how much easier life was inside the house, outside.
Yeah, like a momentum.
Huge momentum. We didn't realize that we were having money problems or even having arguments about money until we realized what it was like not to have them. And so that's huge. I mean, that's like, wow, we don't have any of this struggle anymore. This is amazing. So yeah, that you brought up some really good points there. So what would you say to this? If you had, I know Profit Boss Radio really targets women. I know I listen, so I'm a man, but it targets women. So you have a female come up to you and say, my husband just will not get on board. I want to start paying off debt. He's not listening to me. He doesn't want to do what I want to do. What would you tell her? What's the advice you'd give her?
Well, I mean, just to take the sort of broad swath starting points I kind of just covered is I would go right to, so what are your goals? What are your goals and what are his goals? What does he say he wants to do for his finances? And what are the strongly held beliefs that the two of you come to the table with that you're willing to give up? Because really, I don't care what your strongly held beliefs are about money. None of them are true. There's nothing true about money. Money doesn't exist. Money has no reality. Paper money is not money. Money isn't bad. Money isn't good. It's literally a blank canvas. Human beings made it up, and it's just an agreement that we abide by to avoid what economists call the problem of the double coincidence of wants, so that we can barter with more efficiency. All that happens in a money exchange is just a barter, except we barter for money instead of goods now. So I kind of get people in this sort of questioning the universe of things they think are true space. And I say, what are your past experiences about money? And I think the mistake that popular culture makes, by the way, a lot of so-called money experts or money coaches will say, sit down and share your money past. What are your formative experiences about money? As if those things make you, as if they led to the person that you are. When in fact, in many cases, your formative experiences with money just limited you, both of you, right, as a couple. And I say that with fair confidence because the definition of the word describe is to draw a circle around. So if you can describe money or your money experience or your money beliefs, you're drawing a circle around what money is for you. But that means you've left out everything that's not in the circle. It is by definition limiting. And so where are each of you willing to come closer to the other in order to create partnership? Now, there are some universal truths about money. Like it's not like this free thinking kind of a topic that if you save $100 a month for 10 years, I could do that math. I haven't not prepared for that right now, but I can tell you how much money you're likely to have at the end of that period. That a negative net worth is not going to have you have happiness, and a positive net worth is. And that if you're going to retire, you need about $1 million in the bank to produce about $40,000 to $50,000 in retirement income over a 30-year retirement. That's true. And so there are some, just like if you're counting calories or you're watching your macronutrient intake because you want a slim, trim body, there are truths. Each body is a little bit different, and just like each economy is a little bit different. But there are rules about money, and what that means is that we're not making this stuff up, right? It's not like there are practices and systems that will be fairly reliable at getting you where you want to get financially. So the truth is, some couples may need a financial coach. And financial advisors are not typically financial coaches. Financial advisors are typically very analytical thinkers. I think I am in the second or third standard deviation, like way left of center when it comes to financial advisors. And I'm still pretty analytical. So there are lots of financial coaches who are more trained in psychoanalysis. For example, the one I often refer to or send people to is actually a trained nurse. Her skill set is really in being empathetic and intuitive. And so something like that might really help.
You had mentioned just now, you had talked about financial planning and certified financial planners. Now I want to hit you up on these types of questions. So before we started this podcast, you had mentioned telling women about the difference between Roth and a traditional IRA. Let's just go ahead right there. What are your thoughts on a Roth IRA versus traditional IRA? And can you explain how each one works and why one's preferential or why you would suggest one over the other?
Sure. So a traditional IRA and a Roth IRA are two types of accounts that Congress gives you access to as an American wage earner that allow you to get tax benefits. So I refer to each time you pay tax, I call it the tax gate. If you're going to go through a doorway or a gate, like sometimes, that's a passageway into a different area. So when you earn money, it comes from your employer or from your clients if you're self-employed. And when you claim it on your income, you have to pay tax on it. So that's a tax gate. And then sometimes if you earn money in an investment account, you also have to pay tax on it. That's a tax gate. But with Roth and a traditional IRA, you go through the tax gate at different times. So with a traditional IRA, just like a 401k, you don't go through the tax gate in the year that you earn the money. So instead of paying income tax on that money, if you put it in an IRA, you don't have to pay tax on it, which means you get to earn returns if you put it in an investment vehicle, let's say a mutual fund or an ETF that earns you positive returns. You're literally earning money on borrowed money that's not actually yours. You're borrowing it from Congress, okay? So fast forward to you've been saving money in your traditional IRA for many, many years. You're not allowed to take money out of it until you turn age 59 and a half. And at this point, your free money is earning free money on your free money. Like there is a saying that compound returns are the seventh wonder of the world. Maybe it's the eighth wonder of the world.
Yeah, eighth wonder, yep.
At this point, you're now going to phase into your financial freedom time period or your retirement time period. And now when you take the money out, now you have to pay income tax on it. Okay. Congress says, all right, we want our chunk of change. Now we want our borrowed money back. And so if your $10,000 has turned into $200,000, now each time you take money out of the account, you owe income tax on whatever amount is that you take out of the account. And for the Roth IRA, it's just literally swapped. Instead of saving on taxes in the first year, you save on taxes in the year you take money out of the account. So you're earning money, you pay taxes on it, you put it into the Roth IRA, and then after age 59 and a half, your compound returns can be distributed to you in the form of income with zero tax.
So it sounds like in the very beginning, you're borrowing the government's or the Congress's money because you're getting that pre-tax benefit, getting to invest that pre-tax, the money that you borrow from Congress, pay tax on the back end. And on the Roth IRA, like you said, no taxes are taken out. No tax are taken out at withdrawal.
That's right.
So give me an example here. Let's say that you have $1 million in your traditional IRA and you have $1 million in your Roth, okay? Mm-hmm. And somebody wanted to go take a chunk of money out. What would you suggest to your client by taking out, let's say they're going to take out $400,000 to go buy a vacation home? Mm-hmm. Why? And the reason why I'm asking this is when this was explained to me, it made a lot more sense of why you would want to have both types of accounts for leveraging your money towards the, in retirement. So if I came to you as a client and I said, Hilary, I want to buy this $400,000 vacation home. I have $1 million in my Roth, $1 million in my traditional IRA. What would a suggestion be from you?
Let me say I agree with you that it would be great if you could have about an equal amount of money in both types of accounts. Why? Because the tax schemas in the U.S. change. Marginal tax brackets shift. Sometimes they increase, sometimes they decrease. And in a high income tax environment, it would be great if you could spend from the Roth. And in a lower income tax environment, you would then want to maybe spend from your traditional IRA. If you were going to come to me and say, no, first of all, whoever you're talking about has to be over age 59 and a half, because again, you pay a 10% penalty plus full income tax on any distributions pre-age 59 and a half. But if you were going to spend in the beginning of your retirement, I would say spend from the Roth, because you have those free compound returns happening on that borrowed money inside the traditional IRA. So typically, pending any other economics or tax situations, you're going to spend from the Roth first and then from the traditional IRA second.
Gotcha. Tell me about I'm on your website right now. We're looking at it, but we're going to have links to this. But you have a lot of these, I call them your Hilary Hendershott beliefs. And so I think these are very unique. I'm going to read a couple of them off here. So one of them I hear is, I believe you can be financially free. Does this go back to you talking about when you were at the gas station with your BMW, running out of money, transitioning to, having a 7-figure net worth today? Is this what you're talking about in there, or can you expound on that?
Yeah. Yes. So when I was beholden to the credit card companies and when I had financial emergencies that my parents so graciously bailed me out of multiple times, I was not free. I was spending freely, but I wasn't a free person. And you know what I'm talking about, because now that I know about you, that you've been through the same situation. You and your wife before 2011, before you had your come to Jesus, you were not free, even though you were spending freely. And I know, because I produced a result in my own life called I Don't Worry About Money Anymore. Chris, I know I'm on my way to the financial results that I'm committed to. I could retire today in some countries, maybe Mexico or Costa Rica. Like, I've got money, I've got net worth, and I'm confident I'm getting where I want to go. And that's financial freedom. And I know I've produced a result in my life that so many people don't have. And I think that when you come to a financial advisor's website, you're not expecting someone to change the way you think about your own financial situation. And so I often lead with, I believe you can be financially free. I don't care where you are. I don't care how much debt you have. I don't care what you've done in the past. I only care where you set your trajectory on now. And I think that that's transformational. And I want people to know that even if they don't believe it today, I do. For them.
That could be any age. I see so many people say, you don't understand, Chris, I'm 55 years old. It's too late for me. What would you say to them?
I think that the only thing limiting you is your thoughts, which lead to actions, and that anything can happen with alacrity. And alacrity is just speed and ease. I have seen people's financial situations transform after the age of 55. I mean, certainly as you get older, it becomes tougher. It's just like slower. But that doesn't mean it's not possible.
Sure.
I mean, I think it was Sheryl Crow. No one knew who Sheryl Crow was before she turned 45 or something like that. There's just all these stories of people who had zero success in their 30s and early 40s and really sort of turned that old paradigm of success building on itself linearly on its head. There's plenty of examples of that, and you could easily be one.
Well, there's this guy that started frying chicken during his retirement, and his name's Colonel Sanders, and no one knew who he was. So you're right. You're exactly right.
While I do not eat at KFC, I love that story.
You say you believe in a world where everyone has enough.
Yeah, I do.
The reason I'm asking you this, I'm not trying to be a jerk face here, say, well, but the reason I'm asking you is, so I agree with that, but I feel like that also allows people the out to say, okay, well, I am where I'm at. I should just be happy here.
Well, okay, but I was talking earlier about how money has an objective reality to it. You either have enough or you don't. You and I spoke in the pre-interview chat about going to FinCon, and at FinCon there was a talk track. FinCon is a financial bloggers conference. Okay, so there's all these people so young people younger than me. I'm not that young, but people younger than me are looking out into the world and going, how can I make this work? Life is more expensive than ever. It's daunting. The numbers are big. Inflation is a likelihood. What do I do here? And there was this whole track about, I'm not sure if they called it micro spending or like hacking financial freedom hacking, something like that. But they basically are just spending micro amounts of money. They're getting really creative around having these lives that don't cost a lot of money. So you see people creating these lifestyles around what you see all these websites around micro houses and all these amazing ways to create a life with almost no overhead. Well, guess what? If you have almost no overhead, and that's not my life, I've got a ton of overhead, but if you have almost no overhead, it doesn't take that much to have enough. And so again, there's this objective reality around how much money is enough based on what it costs you to live your life. And I believe you can get there. And there's a lot of false thinking around money, like that there has to be a group of people in poverty, and that's just zero-sum thinking, right? That if you ascribe to this technology that I've described to you in this interview, this money operating system technology, and if you believe that explains or can help explain the phenomenon of poverty, like people, it's possible for people to have as much money in their life as they can earn and ask for and keep, and that there's nothing in a free market economy that can prevent you from, that's objective about, that's structural about preventing you from having the money that you want, then you can see that each individual person determines his or her own financial future. And so that truly goes back to the first belief that you quoted, which is, anything is possible. And what that leads to is inevitably you can have enough. And the first thing that needs to change is most people's mindsets about it. Their thinking, what they believe is possible. As soon as you believe it's possible, the plan of action lays itself out in front of you.
I would 100% agree with you on this one, because you're exactly right. As soon as we realized that we made enough money, because for the longest time we made great money and we just kept overspending. As soon as we realized, okay, we make plenty of money, it's not an income problem, we realized we have well over enough. And that kind of gave us that moment of peace where we thought, okay, now we know we have enough. Now let's just make sure our life stays within our belief system. So, that was going back to our envelopes. When there was $8 in the envelope, that means we were spending $8 and no more. And so you were talking about the FinCon. I think they were talking about, you had it right, like it was like money hacking, but it was kind of like a minimalist type lifestyle. You see a lot of that going on as well too. But
I should have refreshed myself on what they actually are calling that, but I feel like it's freedom hacking or something like that.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. I don't know if it's something that I would recommend right away as far as freedom hacking, because I think I really wonder how much freedom there really is when you see some of these freedom hacking, but to each their own. But that's a whole different story. So yeah.
I personally like the idea of helping people earn more income so they can spend a reasonable amount and save a lot.
I completely agree with that. Some of the big takeaways I wrote down from what you were saying. So one of the things I really liked how you said this, because not many people are willing to go out and use this number and say this, but like you had said, you need $1 million to retire with a $40,000 or $50,000 a year income. That's one of your beliefs?
That's true. That's not a belief. That's what I do. That's the technical aspect of what I do. So depending on what kind of portfolio you have, the risk in the portfolio, and now we're getting sort of way out of the scope of what we talked about so far, you can withdraw about $30,000 to $50,000 a year in retirement income. Do not go out and take actions based on what I just said. That is a very technical skill, and I highly recommend having a professional on your team. But my clients are withdrawing about that amount of money from their portfolios on an ongoing basis, by the way, with a cost of living increase. So we give them little boosts to pay for inflation, and can righteously expect to make it through a 30 or in some cases 40-year retirement and not outlive their money.
If someone's listening to this right now, they're 25 years old, can they retire a millionaire on an average income? A lot of people have this belief that I've heard that there's just no way I could ever get to $1 million. It seems like this number now is no longer achievable. People don't believe they can get there. And I look at it and say, look, I look back, Hilary, if somebody would have shown me at age 18 how compound interest worked, my life would look so much different today than it does. I'm not in a bad position at all. We're very comfortable, very happy. But if I can go back when I was 18 years old, and if somebody would have just said, here's how compound interest works, So the reason why I'm asking this question is you might have somebody 20, 25 years old listening to this, and they're thinking, she's talking about, having a 7-figure business and, having $1 million in retirement. That just doesn't seem possible. How realistic is it? And I know the answer to this. I want you to say it because you're the guest on the show, but how realistic is it for somebody to get to $1 million in retirement? I mean, do they have to go out and make $1 million a year?
You're leading the witness, Chris.
I am.
Look, I'm going to tell you about something called the Rule of 72. The Rule of 72 basically says that if you have an investment that returns a particular rate of return, if you take 72 divided by that rate of return, the answer to that problem tells you how long it's going to take for your money to double. So let me make that real for you. If you have an investment account that earns 10% per year, 72 divided by 10 is 7.2. That means if you're able to save $250,000 in 7.2 years without you adding another dollar to that account, it'll be $500,000. In another 7.2 years, it'll be $1 million. All you had to do was save $250,000. Now, how many people do you know that save $250,000 and never save another dollar? Probably doesn't happen. Most people keep saving. I just brought in a client here in Silicon Valley who lived on a normal income, $160,000 a year. In Silicon Valley, they did buy a house early, so their housing costs were low relative to most other people buying in right now, but they just retired with $4 million. And I said to her, what's your secret? What would you tell people? She said, I don't know. I just spend less than I make. Right?
Genius.
I know.
Wow.
And I had Dan Ariely on my podcast, and he's a world-renowned behavioral finance expert. And his show was one of my most popular shows. And people just reacted. I got the greatest comments about this show. But basically, he teaches people about how we're really bad at making decisions. We rely on our brains like they're good decision-making coaches, and they're really not. Our brains are designed to have us survive short-term experiences like getting chased on the tundra by a saber cat, and really terribly designed to do things like manage an investment portfolio effectively or make good long-term choices. So we look out at age 25, being 50 seems so far away, right? You're more focused on beers and bars than you are on taking care of your 50 or let alone 65-year-old self. But the truth is, consistent action makes a huge difference over time. It's just like that saying, right? Give me a lever big enough and I can move the world.
Yeah.
Did I say that right?
You did.
But yeah, most people don't wake up financially until their mid to late 30s. And that's why I never really say to people, oh, if you just start early. The truth is, most people listening to my show are in their mid to late 30s or older. So all I'm going to do by saying that is make them feel really bad about themselves.
Yeah. Who's this lady? I'm not listening to her.
Right. Oh, it's too late for me. My core message is that it's not. I mean, it may take a combination of working later and doing some other sort of resource swapping, but still, you can produce the results that you want. And for those of you who are getting started in your early 20s, kudos to you. I mean, you really are in a position where you can have a life where when you look at your financial situation, you say, I'm glad I didn't make those mistakes. I don't have regrets. I personally was able to turn my regrets into a mission and a platform and a technology that I intend to use to empower people to build real wealth. And so in that sense, I'm grateful for it, but I could be a lot wealthier than I am today. I just happen to turn it into my superwoman cape.
Very cool. So Hilary, wrapping up right now, where can we find more about you?
Sure. So I am the host of Profit Boss Radio. If you have room in your lineup for one more podcast, I'd love if you would check out the show. You can find me wherever you find your podcast, in the iTunes app or podcast app on your mobile device. I also publish the shows to YouTube if you want to check it out there. If you would like a free guide to the money operating system technology that I talked about today, I have a free booklet, ebook on my website at hilaryhendershott.com. Hilary has one L. And Hendershott has 2 T's. It's called the Mind Over Money Guide, and it will help you determine what your money operating system is and how to improve it.
And we'll make sure that we have everything in the show notes that she just mentioned. So if you don't have a pen and paper out, don't worry. Everything will be found inside the show notes. Links to her site, her podcast, and anything else we talked about will be found inside. So Hilary, thank you so much for coming on the show. This was very valuable, not just for my audience, but for me as well. I learned a ton. So thanks so much for coming on. Really glad to have you on.
Thanks, Chris.
And just like that, we wrap up another episode of the Money Peach podcast. That was episode 40. Any of the show notes, any of the links that Hilary and I talked about can be found at moneypeach.com/session 40. That's moneypeach.com/session 40. Special thanks to my producer, Steve Stewart, my assistant, Kayla Sloan. Without them, none of this would be possible. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for the support. We'll see you guys next week, same time, same place, with another amazing episode of the Money Peach podcast. Boom, 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 boom.